Harsha, welcome to from Kochi and welcome to this fantastic Biennale. We stand in the background of your magnificent work of art. And the impression as a viewer is that of the sheer scale of it combined with the intense granularity of art. Harsha, my first question is, how did you conceive of this? The scale and the microcosm of it.
The first, the engagement started with a simple idea of a doodle. When you have kind of very abstract ideas, you start doodling things, and that's the basic kind of sort of structure of thinking for this piece. And then the idea came like, okay, if doodle has a scale, like human has a scale and doodle has a scale when you're doing it, what if the doodle is kind of non-human scale? I mean, if it is so small that we can't see it, and then it could be so large that you get mesmerized by a doodle. So that's it. So I decided to kind of experiment with this enormous doodle. But at the same time, the thought was like this doodle came to my mind, and this whole idea of having a doodle in mind, and why did this doodle come in our time? Much more interesting idea than me doing a doodle. The doodle was there, and I'm just a kind of a reason to get this happen maybe in our time. So it was a very interesting idea that the doodle is here and between us, and it's doing something for all of us, and it just so happened that I did it. So that's the way it kind of come around.
Art is obviously a lot of hard work. The basis of it lies in, as you said, probably intuitions and all of it. By the sheer size of this artwork, how did you go about actually doing it, executing it on this canvas? What was the discipline you brought to bear on your craft?
Well, the first was like, of course, making there were like lots of doodles constantly. I wanted a kind of elongated shape, and that was the idea. So I was making a lot of drawings on a smaller scale. Then once I decided, like in my studio, what is the maximum I could do. So it was done in the studio, and so it was on the floor. And so we decided kind of invite one of the local person who makes bags for children. And I just told him about his idea of making this enormous scale, sort of a screen to hold it and all this. So they were very excited, and they came along and they helped me to put the whole canvas in place. And then it was the physicality of it, the brush. Like the idea of making a brush for this kind of work was very exciting. And so then I had this bed sheet. So we kind of designed the bed sheet into a brush. And so I walked holding the ink, the acrylic paint, and then walking backwards, making this mark on the canvas. And then about 9 people helping me to get the stars and everything, sort of these forms around it. So that was the kind of process. It took about 6.5 weeks to get the whole thing done.
And we had a team of 9 people.
Yeah, 9 people helping me. Like we were like constantly in the studio cooking and almost spending a lot of time just doing the whole thing.
Before we began, we had that interesting bit of conversation on what art does to people, or what is art expected to do to people. What do you think art does, and how does it do?
Yeah, well, that's how does it do? We haven't been located, I feel. We can always have permutations and combinations of ideas. As I mentioned, I think art is all about exposing your mind and body in a space, and then art takes control of from there. You wouldn't even know the whole communication is already done. So it is not that you have the communication in the normal way. Like if somebody tells you a word, you got to know. I mean, when I'm speaking to you, you're trying to understand that with your own senses. But in art, you wouldn't even know, but it's already communicated to you. You will only realize when you have the everyday actions. It somehow inspires you or kind of influences you in your life. So that's what art does. And I think it takes a channel which humans are not aware of it. It's an internal channel which somehow takes you inside and it gets into you, and then it starts operating from inside. So really you can't say, I've done a painting and you have to understand it. It's a very, because I'm not making a kind of illustrations of certain kind of sort of time or space. I think it's much freer than that, and art takes its own channel and it has its own way of communication. But the only thing it needs is your attention and your will to expose yourself and your mind into this process. And once you do that, it's kind of an auto process.
Just to delve a little deeper into the creative process as we talked about now. When you wield your brush as an artist, just like as a writer wields his pen and writes, as you crafted this, or as you do your other work normally, what is the creative process of painting or drawing?
Yeah.
What does it do to you at a deeper level? How does it touch you? How does it transform you? What does it do to you?
Not really, it's not a very conscious process as I wish I could kind of tell you exactly this is what art does to me. It's more like inevitability of living process. What we all do something or the other, and somehow you are bound to do it sometimes. And making art or being with art in the process of the art is a very sort of abstract level of engagement, which is not necessarily a very channeled, explained process. It is not like, okay, I go there and I do this and that's the result. So it's every day is fresh and every morning is like exciting, and every evening is a frustration sometimes because you wait for the next morning. And it's a very beautiful process of kind of a relationship with an object or a matter or an element. So it is not like a terminology we can use that we all do art or we kind of somehow engage with art because of so and so reason. So it's beyond any reason, I guess. To be very simple, I guess most of the time I avoid explaining the idea of art because I just leave it to the people who know much about it. I always say this because there's much being talked about it. But I take the pleasure of being with the process. I think process for me is the most ultimate thing, where you paint or you do something or you are engaged with the material. You're trying to kind of listen to metaphoric languages material speaks, because every material, every situation has many layers of communication. And being an artist, you are attentive to listen to all layers, or at least for many layers as possible, from the same form or material. It is not just one thing which we look for.
The Kochi Biennale has, by all accounts, been extraordinary, quite exceptional. Do you think, by the very virtue of its name, besides the name itself, does Kochi become the Biennale itself?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the beauty of Kochi Biennale. Is like it's a people's Biennale, which has been sort of which is going around, and I feel that's a very strong terminology to use. Like long ago, Havana Biennale is sort of also termed as a similar kind of thing, where people participate in the Biennale so strongly that it becomes everybody's. So it's not just somebody is doing, you go and see it. Like everybody is involved in it one way or the other. I mean, even if you're an audience, you are participating in Biennale as intensely as an artist showing in the Biennale, because I don't see an artist as sort of more in a stronger participation than an audience, simple audience. A simple audience who comes into Biennale is as strong as an artist who is performing in the Biennale, because there is a level of human engagement which is equal. So I feel in that sort of magnitude, I think it's a great thing that it's so many people are involved in it, in all layers of building it, kind of communicating it and promoting it, and at the same time making it happen. So I think that's the most beautiful thing what we have at the moment.
In other words, art doesn't stand in isolation. It is complete when the artist and the viewer are coming together, as you say.
Yeah, but Well, I don't know. I mean, like it's whether an artist is very conscious that he wants to complete his artwork by showing it. If you're if I'm very honest about the idea of studio process, an artist just does involve in the studio process. He doesn't think about what will happen, when will I communicate this, and all that, which can be practicality of a material which goes out of the studio. But when you're having a relationship with this material, like if you call it painting as material, it's so pure that you don't care whether it's the end results and all that, because you're just there with that thing. Eventually, yes, of course, a painting is done and somebody looks at it, and all the other process which happens around it is quite beautiful. If you want to call it as complete process, I mean, let's call it that way. But I feel painting doesn't stop there even, after it communicates, it wait for the next audience, or it wait for the next century, for the next humanity to kind of, have a different relationship with the same material.
Peaceful.
Because what you see today is like even the cave drawings, what it communicates today, and what it did to the contemporaries, it always transformed. And in that way, there is no complete. The word complete with art is a very difficult proposition.
Yeah. This one question I've always asked artists in particular, the intersection. What are those intersections or intersection between art and life?
Yeah. Intersection.
Yeah.
Well, so how would you? That's something which is already like. It's very difficult. First, you have to bifurcate, art and life, if you want to start thinking about intersection. For me, I was just explaining. I will take this great example of Walzen, who's also a wonderful artist here. I was explaining his work with one of the other friend, that you really can't bifurcate his life, his art, whether you're with him, whether he's art or what he does is art. I think he's a great example, which somehow demolishes this idea of separating artists from what he does. I think that's something which we learn from this kind of artist. I feel we really can't sort of put these two things separately, like art and life, and then separate it and then try to build a bridge. I think we'll just I will give you a kind of poetic example. It's like if river is there, you want to bridge something, the land is already holding the river. If we think in that way, so you really can't separate either side of the river. So I would leave it at that to answer the question.
Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure. Pleasure speaking to you.